Welcome to the CLB Forge podcast. This is the show to help equip you and your church for mission, ministry, and multiplying disciples. Here are your hosts, Pastor Mike Natal and Dr. Ryan Nilsson.
Welcome to the show today. Welcome to episode 43. One of the main themes of our show is helping churches multiply disciples, and today we're having a very special conversation about that very thing.
Our guest today is President Dean Rostad. Dean was brought up in a Christian home in Chilliwack, British Columbia. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
You just brutalized that one.
Did I? Oh no. How is it? It's not Chilliwack?
No, it's not Chilliwack. That's quite interesting though, Mike.
What is it?
Chilliwack,
British Columbia.
Great. Now we
Dean
just lost all of our Chilliwack listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get them back. So,
Hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that it's officially come off the rails with that, I apologize ahead. Dean had a lot of fond memories from his childhood, simply hanging out around the church while his parents volunteered in leadership roles. He actually fondly recalls hiding Christmas oranges around the church to later check up on them to see the condition and how they've molded. My kind of man. God worked powerfully in Dean's life through Bible camp as a teen when his faith came alive, and then on summer staff where God began hinting at a call into ministry as a vocation. Dean's ministry training came from the Canadian Lutheran Bible Institute, CLBI, Acts Seminary, and the LB Seminary. God has led Dean on many ministry adventures, including youth ministry, camp directing, and serving as pastor of Resurrection Lutheran Brethren in Camrose, Alberta for 11 years. I nailed Camrose because I think my buddy serves at that church now. Is that where Ryan Dittman's at?
No, Ryan's in Calgary. Greg Rokas is there and Jeremy Alford.
All right. So Camrose, Alberta for 11 years, and now as president of the Canadian Lutheran Bible Institute. Dean has a love for skiing, biking, canoeing, and spending time with his family. Dean has been married for 25 years to his wife, Kim, and together they have 4 great kids, Luke, James, Sonia, and Julia. God has given Dean a dream to lead CLBI to be a discipling movement that will help see thousands saved, the poor loved, and a church revived. Join me in welcoming President Dean Rostad. Dean, it is great to have you here with us.
Good to be here. It's good to join you from snowy Alberta.
It's great to be with you today, and it's great to see you again. Dean, can you tell us a little bit about, tell us a story about a person in your life who had a big impact on your discipleship journey?
Yeah, the great thing about being in a podcast is being asked those questions. I had to think about that one. It's like, man, that's a great question. And I've had many mentors in my life, some formal, some informal, and someone who came to mind, a significant mentor over a good number of years is Pastor Harold Rust. And so Harold and his wife Joyce are currently planting a church in Red Deer, Alberta, an LB church down there, the river. But many, many moons ago, when I was just graduated from high school, Harold and his wife Joyce and their little baby daughter Annalise were the camp directors at Camp Luther in Mission, BC. And so it was a very formative time in my life. And so that was my first introduction to Harold. And he was, I think he was just in the middle of seminary or just starting seminary at that time. And that was the first introduction to Harold. And then quite a few years later, boom, I was leading that camp, or the program director, and Harold came back and hung out for a summer again with his family, with his much larger family, while he was on sabbatical, kind of wrestling with a call of where to go next. And Harold, he was a mentor in my life where he kind of showed up at a very specific time. It was a time where I was trying to find my home. Yeah, so I was brought up in the Lutheran Church, brought up in the ELCIC, which is ELCA equivalent in Canada, but very much an evangelical Lutheran who didn't have a home. I, in some ways, it resonated more with my friends that were more from Anabaptist tradition in terms of their passion for outreach and a personal relationship with Christ. And so I didn't know where I fit. And then meeting Harold, he was kind of like, hey, there's this little group called the Lutheran Brethren. And he told me more about it. He gave me a little book called Living Lutheran Christianity. And I remember reading that book going, who are these guys? I've never heard of them before. And I was like, hey, these people kind of sound like my people, these worlds coming together. So God used Harold in that time. And then later on, Harold became the president at CLBI and invited me to come on staff. But when he came on staff there, he helped change the direction of the school from more of an academic school to returning to its discipleship roots and to kind of blaze a new trail of what that would look like. And I kind of came on staff with Harold, and it was fun. These pioneers, they go forward, they forge a trail, and the leaders that come after them, the leader goes in the front, kind of is a lightning rod and kind of creates a wake, and other people can come in behind them and just grow and learn. And Harold created that space for me in my life. And then I started pastoring Resurrection Lutheran Brethren Church here in Camrose. I was there for 11 years, and Harold was one of my elders for years. So anyway, long-standing mentor. Appreciate Harold.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's actually one of the reasons why we love to ask that question, as the initial kind of get to know, like allow us and our listeners to get to know you as a guest. And what's really amazing is to just see how interwoven people's lives are with the people who have like mentored them. And so it's cool to see how, he came into your life, then came out, came back in, came out. And each time he probably impacted you differently as he came in and spoke into your life. And so it's just great to hear stuff like that, how God is able to use those people in order to direct our footsteps in what we're doing.
I got to visit Alberta last November 2019, which it was 2019, but it was 73 years ago in the before time.
In COVID time,
right. Yeah. And man, it was just amazing. I got to meet you, Dean, and see CLBI. Got to just bounce around Alberta, spend some time in Camrose, and it was neat to kind of visit with lots of different people and see the impact Harold's had on a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, and you as well. Yep. It was very clearly evident that you are one of those people influencing lots of others, and so I'm really, really excited to have you here today.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. It's fun to be here, and it's as years go on, it's fun to see what God does. When we're working away, just focused on what's in front of us, as the years go by, it's fun to be able to look back and say, hey, wow, I didn't realize God was going to use that moment, or even the mentors that show up at different times in our lives.
Dean, can you tell us a little bit about the CLBI?
So CLBI, the Canadian Lutheran Bible Institute in Camrose, Alberta. All right. So this is up by Edmonton, Alberta, an hour from there. And CLBI was started in 1932. So it's been around for a long, long time. There's a group of Scandinavian Lutheran settlers who came to this area, and they wanted to disciple their kids. They wanted their kids to stay in the church, to love Jesus. And they created this school. And it was started at the bottom of the stock market crash of 1932 of the Great Depression. So that's where it started. Okay. What a great time to start something new. At some of the hardest times. Yeah. It wasn't the first of the LBIs, the Lutheran Bible Institutes. There was actually 5 LBI schools. The first one started in Minneapolis in 1919. And this one was modeled after that one. So it was a bit of a sister school. Now, the LB, they had their Bible school through that time as well. But now, in the LBI tradition, CLBI is the last one standing. So the Free Lutheran still has their school, which is great. And CLBI is here, and the rest of them are gone. Okay. Most of our students are Canadian, but some come from the States, some come from other places in the world as well. And Camrose is funny. It's kind of like a Canadian Fergus Falls. This is Lutheran Mecca in Camrose. Lutherans turn to Camrose to pray, we joke about. All right.
This is probably the first time we've acknowledged that on this show. The magnetism of Fergus Falls.
Yeah, you got
and
it.
And now
man.
Camrose as well. Okay, our two capitals. Right. Our two capitals.
Mm-hmm. They are. CLBI is I look at it as a discipleship tool that God uses Okay. They have, just like Luther, when he wrote the catechism, that was a discipleship tool. And the Bible school, when it was created, was a discipleship tool. But the big difference with CLBI, with a Bible school, is it comes with community. You know, it comes with intense dorm-based living. We average between, well, right now, 30 to 45 students. And we don't really want to be that much bigger than that. We're a close, intimate, discipling community. And it is a lot of fun. I even met my wife there years ago. It's good for evangelical Lutherans to find each other, because when we find each other, we go farther together. Not just in marriages, but also in the friendships that we bring as well. Like, it's like Mike, you were talking about, yeah, Ryan. I know Ryan in he's actually in Calgary. He's on my board. And but when we find our people, we can support each other and we go farther together. And so even during the pandemic, every couple of weeks on Zoom, we get together with a bunch of guys that I went to Bible school with 25 years ago. And we're still in touch, praying for each other, encouraging one another, helping each other through different decisions or things that are going on in our lives. So that's a little bit about CLBI. And
cool. What's the age range of people who attend?
Most of our students are mostly just out of high school, like 18 to 21, 22s on average. And sometimes there's some students that are 23, 24, 25. And then there's some community students that may live off campus that come in from time to time that'll be a bit older. But mainly it's a zoo of beautiful young adults.
Nice. And
we have a whole new generation that we're discipling. And we'll talk a bit about that today, because everything keeps changing and we're trying to figure out what that looks like. Okay.
Cool. So what are some of the what's some of the fun that you're having there as the president?
Some of the fun that I'm having as president? Well, I've got 4 guys that I disciple. Okay. They're in a discipleship group with me. And so we do life together. And so I meet one-on-one with them once a week. We meet together in a discipleship group, and they get to know me really well. And I get to know them really well. And it's great having a place that you can go and have fun, laugh with each other, and share your life with them. I also go canoeing. We start off right when we start our year, all of our classes are a week long in length. And some of those weeks are like a canoe trip. Like as soon as the students arrive in September, boom, we take them for a week in the mountains, canoeing and hiking, just like intensive bonding. Nice. And so it's a lot of fun. So nice. Some crazy things we get to do. And my family kind of gets absorbed in the whole thing, which is fun as well. What else about the school can I tell you about? Yeah, so we have an international mission program as well. Some of your listeners may be familiar with the World Mission Prayer League. That's a Lutheran missionary sending group that came out of the LBI tradition. Their home office is in our building as well. So we get to expose our students to incredible people that are international missionaries, local missionaries, and they catch the heart of mission. You know, when you see it in action, you can learn it in the classroom, you can hear it in a sermon, but when you see it, that's when it comes alive. A number of years ago, we had some of our dorm parents were wrestling with a call to go serve in East Asia in missions. And through that, it was quite a journey for them to wrestle through that. And our students watched them wrestle with that call to mission and how they navigated it. And they finally left and went as missionaries. But the students that were there that year, we've had quite a few career missionaries come out of that group, and they were impacted by that. It's kind of, you catch that stuff. So that's what I love about the school. I love that we can be there together and follow Jesus together and figure out what that looks like. So that's a bit about the school. In my role, I get to be the chief cook and bottle washer of the school as president of the school. So I get to run the school, a lot of staffing, details, looking after, make sure the students are looked after, the physical campus, classes, the funding. And But one thing I love about my role there is the board has invited me to come and to dream. Where are we to go from here? I've been there 4 years. And so when I was pastoring at Resurrection before I came here, and Resurrection was when I started pastoring, we were in a gymnasium, and we had property, and we worked until we're finally ready to build. And I actually I was invited to interview for this position the day we broke ground for our new building. Wow. I'm like, this is just silly. This is not the time to leave. We're just about to, the hole is being dug. And I'm like, God, what is up with this? And as I prayed about that call, I was like, my prayer was, God, CLBI's had a good run. It's been here since 1932. All the other LBI schools are done now. Is CLBI done as well? And as I was praying about that, God put it on my heart. No, I'm not done. Well, what do you want to do? And as I was praying at a confirmation retreat, remember in the afternoon praying about this, and just the ideas started coming. It's like, what about discipleship? Actually discipling these students so they can disciple others after they go. And as a parish pastor, I tried that many times, trying to train up my people in my congregation to disciple others. And I couldn't get that going. And so this was an opportunity to kind of rethink how we do that, and how do we train up students so they can do it in their churches.
That gets into the main focus of our conversation today. We wanted to talk to you about an initiative that you've been working on and leading called the 72. Can you tell us what is the 72?
You bet. What is
Man, wouldn't it have been so much cooler if we said it like, what is the 72? And we had stuff come across the board, pyrotechnics. Right. No? Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
In a world.
Just feel free to edit that out. Yeah, here we go. Yes.
In a world where discipleship is challenging and ever changing.
You sound more like a pirate, though, than the movie guy.
What?
You sound kind of more like a pirate. You're kind of in a world where...
Well, I could do a pirate, too. All right, well...
No, that's okay. Let's just let Dean save this sinking ship. Dean, tell us a little bit about 72.
You bet.
In a pirate voice.
All right.
No, normal voice. You do your normal voice.
No, I'll do a normal voice. Normal voice. Good. So the 72, I got to back up a little bit. So I shared with you already a little bit about what was on my heart when I came to the Bible school. The Bible school has always been about discipleship. But how do we disciple these students in a way that they can actually disciple others after they leave? And then for it to actually multiply. That's been the dream. That is the Great Commission. And as a parish pastor, you guys can probably relate to this. You go to a conference, you read a book, you visit a church, and you see a different model of what a multiplying, discipling movement could look like. You're like, this is awesome. I remember this is going to date me, way back reading of the Cell Church with Ralph Neighbor and Where Do We Go From Here? Way back. And you read about these things, you're like, is this possible? Could I do this in my local church? And so we bring these ideas back. We start something. We try to get something going. And too often I saw it kind of the small groups went for a while, and then they would just kind of peter out and fall apart. And how do I get this going that has momentum that will keep on going? And so at the Bible school, we recognized that we needed to do something that was bigger than just what we're doing in those mainly 1 or 2 years that we had the students. How can we do something bigger? And as we wrestled with this, we spent a lot of time living in the passage of Luke 10 when Jesus sends out the 72 disciples. He sends them out to the places where he's about to go. And he sends them out in pairs. It just is, Jesus speak to us through your word, through this passage. And as we wrestled with that and lived in that passage, one of my staff members was like, and we were trying to figure out a program name of what this thing could be called. And one of my staff members is like, hey, what about 72? We've lived in that passage. Yeah. So the 72 is a key part of what we're doing. Like Jesus worked with the three, Peter, James, and John. He worked with the 12 disciples. But then there's this group of 72 people that he sends out. And I like to think that the 72 are nameless people. And I can relate to that. I can relate to being one in the crowd, just kind of watching Jesus, following him around. Maybe not one of the disciples themselves. That's a little too big. And then as we read in the Gospels, Jesus says, all right, he calls them out by name. So Jesus had other relationships. And it's your turn now. And they go out and they practice. They go out and do ministry. And he comes back and he talks to them about how to go. And multiplication happens. So as Jesus sent out the 72, he sends us out. And my prayer is that as our students go out from CLBI, what they've learned at CLBI, they can take with them. And it'd be like yeast that is good yeast that is being transplanted to the dough of the church, and it starts to spread. And we can support it. So this is very different than a traditional Bible school. Bible school is typically just a destination that you come to, you experience it, and then you look back on it. Oh yeah, that was great. I was discipled back at Bible school. But really it's a bigger vision of we're not done yet after those 2 years. So we're still in contact with them. We're still doing training. We're still equipping, and we're still training up more people and helping them. And we're having some successes. It's going well, and disciples are being made. We started shaping the Bible school, or changing the culture of the Bible school, that we hoped that students would be able to replicate what we were doing. So we started paying attention to what Jesus was doing in the small things in life and in the big things. So we're always kind of watching. Jesus, how are you showing up through that class, through that devotion, through what's going on in my own life? How are you showing up? We have our smaller discipleship groups I already talked about. We've had to learn to train up leaders in a different way as well. Like for years and years, I've taught how to lead a Bible study class. And I've probably taught it 15 times over the past, 20 years. And if I interviewed all the people that took that class and asked them, so how many of you went out to actually lead Bible studies? I believe it'd actually be quite a small percentage of people who actually went out and did it. Because even in the church, people were like, whoa, I can't lead the Bible study. I can't do that. I'm no Francis Chan. I'm no Gene Bow or whatever. I don't have the knowledge to do that. Pastor, you do that. You've been to seminary. You do that. So we had to figure out a different way of discipling these students so they could actually feel that they could do this. Mm-hmm. And so we looked at how Jesus was a master rabbi and he asked great questions. He would just ask questions. Hey, what were you guys arguing on the road back there? Why do you call me good? He would just ask questions, deeper and deeper questions, to kind of pick at the surface of what was going on. So for us, we've trained up our students to do that as well. They know how to ask really good questions, and they've become comfortable even with silence as well as they ask questions of each other in their discipleship groups. We've already mentioned that we've already tried to develop a mission heart with our students. We love to share stories of what God is doing. We love to slowly develop leaders. We spend a lot of time in contemplative prayer, spending daily time in God's word, and then sharing how God's getting our attention through that and going out and mission together. So all of this is kind of like the 72 is kind of like the umbrella that kind of puts this together, but it's meant to be much larger than just what we do at the Bible school. And so the 72 is, how do we replicate this inside of churches? Because our churches, every church has a value system. Every church runs a certain way. And let's be honest that in the church, I think we've all inherited a little bit of a dysfunctional way of doing things. We're just kind of focused on how we do our Sunday morning services and doing that really well. I love our Sunday morning service, but we have to figure out how can we do this in a way that will allow disciples to be made and multiply as we go. So some things that we have done with the 72 to spread a discipling culture in churches. We have discipleship groups that meet Wednesday nights, and some meet in person, like at CLBI or in other geographic areas as well, in US and Canada, and even in Norway and Switzerland. And we meet via Zoom. We have a Zoom feed going on at 7:30 p.m. And then so we do some teaching, some testimony, and then people go out into their discipleship group. Some might close their laptop and just meet around the coffee table, and others might meet in a breakout room over Zoom. And that's how the 72 functions. And other people will meet. There's a Bible camp near Fergus, Mount Carmel Bible camp. And they have a group that meets out there on a different night of the week. And they watch the recording of that Wednesday night session on a different evening. So that's a little bit of in a nutshell, what the 72 is.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting to see where that idea came from, and also how it's kind of adapted into different areas too, because it seems like it's now stretching out a little bit further than where it started. So one of my questions is, where did this idea come from? Did you read about this? Was it something that, through prayer and discussing with other people, it kind of came to you? Or like, is it just a whole bunch of stuff working together? How did this idea, the 72, come about?
Well, as a pastor, we all know how to steal ideas from other places. We're gifted in that, because God gives his people good ideas. And so, through my life, trying to pull together bits and pieces of how can we make this work? And there's a funny story of when we got this going. It was kind of getting ideas from different things, looking for the common denominators of discipleship programs, discipleship ministries. And when I started to see things line up, like multiple groups doing the same thing, I thought, okay, that's a core thing that I need to include in what we're doing. So it's not a program, it's not a curriculum necessarily, but it is definitely trying to change the culture of what we're doing. And so as we went forward, Mike, we can remember life before the pandemic, right? Yeah, we can remember that.
Man, that feels like years ago.
Yeah, it does. So, gee whiz, yeah. In the time before 2020,
when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Yes.
Yes.
I started training up leaders to start discipling people online. And so they had been through 2 years of Bible school, or 1 year. These are my leaders who just kind of resonated with what we're doing, and they wanted to learn how to disciple others. And so we trained them up, and in January of 2020, they were ready to go. So just before the pandemic. So we were going to do just a 6-week thing. I contacted pastors and leaders all over US and Canada, and the pastors were all excited about this. Hey, you want to help disciple people in our church? Yeah, please do. I'll promote it. I'll get in contact with people. And we were going to come online using Zoom. People didn't really know what Zoom was at the time. And people looked at it and they were like, oh, I don't know. You want to do what? You want us to be, you want us to get together with people that we don't know, and you want us to really share what's going on in our life? That sounds kind of vulnerable. You want to do it via Zoom? I don't know about this. So when we went to actually launch the 72, we had 0 people sign up for what we were doing. They were like, this is too weird. That's not what the internet is used for. And when I met with my leaders that night, we called this the beautiful failure. We got together and we just laughed, because no one signed up for what we were going to do. We thought we had communicated it well. We made videos, we spoke to people, and people were interested, they were intrigued, but no one would take the bite. And as I spoke with my leaders that night, in the back of my mind going, okay, Lord, is this just kind of game over? Is this just another attempt of doing something new and nothing happening. And as I spoke to my leaders, they were like, Dean, we're onto something here. As we trained, we met weekly for a number of weeks. And the leaders were saying it was so life-giving to have a place to come together, a people who were going to ask me questions about how Jesus was at work in my life. And we loved each other and we laughed and we grew. And they were like, we need this. And at that point, we're like, all right, let's just pray about what to do next, because we're trying to get this going. We're trying to support our alumni in doing this. We're trying to bring new people into it, but 0 people showed up. So let's just pray. So we took some time off to pray, and then the pandemic showed up. And a few weeks later, or I think at the end of February or in March, right when lockdown had happened, we got together online with the leaders and we just laughed and we went, okay, we're ready to go. Well, let's try this again. And they said, let's do it a little bit different. Let's just invite people to come and just check it out and see if they stick around. And boom, we had, and no one could do anything. Everyone was, remember March 2020? We're all just stuck at home.
Yep.
And we're all learning about how to mute and unmute with Zoom. Like it was new. People were like, I can do this. And so we started this up, and then boom, we had, I don't know, probably 8 different discipleship groups happening through that. We met till the end of June, and we brought about, on average, 50 people a week and up to about 70 or 80 involved completely. And just to have a place for people to talk and to share and to grow together was powerful. And I think it was really helpful too, just to have a safe place. And it would ebb and flow who was in each group, but there were some beautiful things that happened there. And we just kind of kept going there. So that's how it started. And it was fun to see my leaders grow as well. Like I had some students that I had to come on, we need help. We need more leaders. And I think you can do this. Oh, I can't do it. Well, here, someone else would do it with you. And they would do it. And they would kind of doing this. And then on Wednesday nights, leaders would meet beforehand just to kind of find out what's going on that evening. And then we'd meet. And then afterwards, our leaders would come back together, and we call that the after party. And in the after party, the leaders, we would have a chance just to talk about, okay, what went on that night? What went well? What didn't go well? And what questions did you ask? What worked well? Just do to process what was going on. And after 6-7 weeks of doing this, one of my leaders said, Dean, this was exactly what I needed. You taught us this at Bible school for 2 years. You modeled it. We could test it out. We took classes on this, but to actually do it. And this was kind of like just the training wheels that we needed to be able to do this. And now it produced some just beautiful, quiet, calm leaders who were confident in their ability and confident that Jesus loves them so much and will show up right with them, and they can disciple other people. And it's not a magic curriculum. It's just a way of life. And so it's fun. I don't know where it's going to lead, guys. And but I've got some ideas, but Jesus is teaching me not to hold too tightly to it. I can have the ideas, I can get things going, but just got to let it run and pivot as my leaders, as these young adults innovate inside it and change it. I need to pay attention to that, because I can get pretty stuck in my ways. No, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's like, no, Jesus has other plans.
Wow. I love that you're empowering your younger leaders to speak into it and change it. That's so beautiful. And I love that you, even when the first iteration of it didn't work, when your first signups came back at 0, that you learned from it and you didn't give up. And just, months later, God had other plans for this. And that's awesome. Real quick, I just want to get a quick sense of what it's like to be a part of this. So it sounds like the signature gathering time is a weekly get together.
Yep.
And how many weeks do you run this, like, for a season? Like, is it 3 months, 8 months, 10 weeks?
Yeah. We're still in the beginning of this, Ryan.
Okay.
And so, we did this the first, through lockdown. That's when we started, and we took a break for the summer.
Okay.
And over the summer, we trained up some more leaders. Here's the next, now we're in like chapter 2. And I got a church involved now. This is kind of like the next experiment.
Okay.
It's an experiment because there's lots of things of like, oh, that worked, that didn't work. Okay, let's keep going. And so in this next chapter, to answer your question, we kind of just started in September, and we told everyone we're going to go the whole school year, which is for us, it was September to the end of April. And then we'll reevaluate from there. And we told people if it works for you, if this is life-giving, stay with us. If it doesn't, that's okay. It has to work for everybody. So kind of got to go in there. But over the summer, we over the last, when was it? A couple of years ago, I was traveling near Vancouver, BC, and I was connecting with another pastor out there, part of the Lutheran Church Canada, which is LCMS in Canada, church called Walnut Grove Lutheran. And they were a church that we resonated with. We recognized, hey, I think we're on the same page. I think we're going in the same direction. And they were wrestling with how to do discipleship, how to do outreach, and wanting to do it in a different way. They kind of done with the more of attractional model. They had a good, healthy church, good, healthy Sunday morning worship experience, but they were trying to figure out, okay, what else? I think there's something more we need to shape our discipleship culture here. And so in June of last year, I started meeting with them and their leaders and trying to explain what we're doing. And there was a lot of confusion about what is this? Is this a program? Is this a curriculum? And it was like, no, these are just ongoing relationships, discipling relationships. And it's taken the long road together. And it was really interesting to try to see them understand what we're doing, because they're kind of like, what? You mean it's this or is it this? I'm like, neither. Well, maybe a bit of that and a bit of this. And they just didn't get it. But after I talked about it shared more stories, you got to share a lot of stories about what's going on. And as I shared more stories and how I've been growing as well through it, how Jesus has been getting my attention and loving me more deeply in the gospel, they were like, hey, there's something here. Let's try this out. So so these were like the leaders of the church that I was working with. They called them the A team. It was kind of funny. And so I worked with them, and they were gung-ho. It's like, let's do this in the fall. And turns out when the fall came, when we were going to just train up the leaders and launch our groups, that none of those leaders actually had time for it. These were the movers and shakers of the church. They were the ones leading a lot of ministries, and they were involved already. And it was a pandemic too, so we didn't have the same capacity that we usually did. And so I preached a video sermon out there in the summer, and invited people to join this. And we just invited people to come and kick the tires. And so we had a bunch of people show up. And so here we have, this is our first experiment, okay? How to get a local church involved in this thing. And so they came and checked this out. And here I have a bunch of leaders that are like 19 and 20-year-olds. And I've trained them up. They've led groups with other young adults, but here they are, their first time, they're going to be leading groups with people that are twice their age. And I'm like, you guys can do this. And so we launched in September, and there was a lot of confusion. People were like, I don't get this. When are we getting to the Bible study? That's usually how people thought about this. This isn't a Bible study. We're going to study the book of Mark, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, or whatever the theme may be. And we spend time in God's word, but we spend a lot of times asking questions, talking about our own experiences, talking about how Jesus is showing up in our lives. And as we were going, I remember one of my leaders, she's in a group, and she's a young girl. You know, I think she's 19 or 20. She's leading this group, and with these wonderful new people from Walnut Grove Lutheran. And one of the group members says, "Hey, Pastor James, what do you think?" And one of my alumni says, "There's a pastor in my group." He's like, "I can't do this. I can't lead this. There's no way I can do this." And anyway, they laugh about that now. But she did a great job. And this is a student that didn't return to CLBI for their second year because he thought, "Nah, leadership, I don't want to be involved in a leadership program." So just as when the disciples that Jesus chose, those are the people that were they were skipped over by the other rabbis. They'd got on to their fishing careers, or a tax collector. Okay. And so now we have this neat thing going on with this church, that we're actually starting to recognize leaders and train them up. And the people that are there, community is forming. They're getting to know each other. They're caring for each other. And now as the pandemic comes to an end, we pray, they're praying about, okay, what's next? How can we how can we be on mission together? And I'm excited to see what's going to come from it as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes we may sit and listen to something like this and think, well, yeah, as soon as the pandemic's over, I should try this. And it just really strikes me that this is something that began during the pandemic. You do not need to wait to start this. And in fact, this is probably a good time.
Oh, yeah. There's so much loneliness out there.
Yep.
And a lot of this is just learning to love people, care for people, really listen, and to be patient.
Yeah.
And to let Jesus show up in the midst of it.
Yeah. So you have this weekly gathering. There's teaching, testimony time, and then you break out into discipleship groups. What happens in the discipleship group?
A resource that we've leaned on a lot is by Pastor Greg Finke. Joining Jesus on His Mission is one of the main books that he wrote. He's an LCMS pastor. And so he's got some good questions in that too. That'd be a good resource for people. And what we encourage our groups to do is really, you ask the question, how is Jesus showing up in your life? Or as Greg Finke would say, how's Jesus messing with you? On Wednesday nights, when we get into our D groups, there's been some teaching that night, usually around the mission practices that Greg Finke lays out in his book. So we have a little bit of a curriculum to follow. Seeking God's kingdom. See if I can name them all. Probably not. Seeking God's kingdom, being a people of prayer, and a few others. I don't have them right in front of me, but these 5 mission practices. Anyway, hearing from Jesus, talking to people, praying for others, something like that. And like I said, it's not a magic curriculum. So, but we do teaching on that, and then we launch into our groups. And in our groups, we say, how is Jesus getting your attention? They may talk about the lesson that night, or they may talk about how Jesus is showing up in their family. Maybe there was a death in someone's life. And how is Jesus showing up in the midst of that? We've also given people, everyone buys this is like a daily office book called Seeking God's Face. And we all have this, which is kind of fun. So we're all reading the same scripture on the same day, every day, if we remember to do it. And some weeks we'll just read the scripture and just find out, okay, what stands out from you from the scripture tonight? What's going on? So in the groups, it was interesting as I spoke to Pastor James, as I was asking him, what are your people saying as they've been checking out the 72? And he said, well, many of them have said it's not what they were expecting, because most small group Bible studies that we attend are information based. Here's a study. We're studying Ephesians, or we're studying how to pray, or whatever it might be. And they're still waiting for that download. And my leaders come in, and there's some content in there, but really it's getting a sense of, okay, Jesus, you've promised to be with us always. So what are you doing in our lives? And so the questions get quite personal. And I train my leaders in 3 really big questions. One is, how's God getting your attention? And there's lots of different questions you can ask about that. Even sharing the highs and lows of your week, you can ask, you can find out, how's God getting your attention? And then the next question is, how's God changing the way you think? So how's God changing your thinking about whatever's going on? And then what is God inviting me to believe? So those are the 3, big process questions we have. And we have some diagrams with like 15 questions that you can ask in all those areas. But it's to help it to go deeper. And then even in the groups, people want me to say, hey, last week you were talking about this. How's that going? Or, hey, let's pray for this person. They're going through a hard time. So we process life together. Greg Finke, his book, he's got some 5 key questions that he asks to, like I said, there's no magic curriculum out there, but it's about having some people that you're in an intentional discipling relationship with, and you're going to go the long road together. And my prayer is that if there's people who, especially if they live in the same town, that they'll go, hey, a few of us like playing hockey or like playing football. Let's be on the same team together. And then we'll be on mission together, and we'll love that group and to see what happens there. Or there might be people that in my prayer for the 72 is also that, because we have people from all over the place, that they'll be like, hey, if someone shares their heart and their vision. I have one of my alumni is starting a surfing ministry out in Washington. And I would love for other people to get the bug. And they're like, man, let's move to Washington and let's join that ministry and see what happens. Or let's go plant a church together, or let's go do this. And so another really cool thing is we have some people who live in or are part of a church where they're the only young adult in their church. So instead of having to go to the big church down the road, this provides, they can be part of a smaller community, but still have a connection with young adults. But this isn't just young adults. So I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah, you asked her what do the evenings look like? So that's kind of what it looks like. We see how Jesus is showing up.
Yeah, you're answering that, but you're also telling some great stories along the way too. That's beautiful.
It's fun. Mm-hmm. It's fun to see what's going to come next and how to keep this thing moving. And so right now we have groups that we have 8 D groups at the Bible school itself, and then we've got a few others that meet. So online on Wednesday nights, we'll see our students, but we'll also see our alumni and people in other areas too. And so the cool thing about that is my students see alumni doing this in their hometowns. And so right away from the beginning, my students see, oh yeah, that's going to be me. This isn't just about me coming to Bible school for a year or two. It's like I'm being equipped so I can go out and disciple others.
So Dean, what as we kind of begin to wrap up, what kind of advice would you give to a ministry leader who might be listening to this and saying, I would love to start or become like a disciple maker? What type of resources or encouragement or advice would you give an individual who's thinking that way?
I would say to start with, they already know how to disciple others. We do. Just let's try to make certain things a bigger priority in our lives. As a parish pastor, I love to ask pastors this question, like, what percentage of your time goes into prepping the Sunday morning event? It really varies. I'm a really slow sermon writer. And, some weeks I bet up to 75% of what I was doing was revolving around the beautiful Sunday morning experience, from committees, planning, buildings, whatever it might be. And it's a beautiful thing. We've been meeting, forever, since Jesus rose from the dead. Christians rallied around the empty tomb on Sunday morning to proclaim that Christ is risen. And that's why we do it on Sunday morning. But we've inherited this it's become, it's beautiful. Okay, guys, I'm not anti Sunday morning at all, but it's become like such a huge thing that we think that that's how we're supposed to disciple others. It's all through the Sunday morning. And someone gave me a quote. They said, Dean, we need to learn to let, I wrote it down so I don't misquote it. How do we let that hour and a half of Sunday morning no longer do all the heavy lifting of discipleship? Sunday morning is great.
Nice. That's great.
Great. It's beautiful, but it's not the main thing. I have a paraphrase of a quote. I was at a pastor's symposium and Gene Bow was teaching at it. And it's fun when Gene teaches. We always try to get him in the ditch, right? Get him off topic, and that's where it's fun to see how long we stay there, and we're talking about stuff. And he had this quote. He probably won't remember saying this, and I'm paraphrasing it. And he said, "You guys and your love affairs with your churches. If we're gonna disciple all nations, and we have to do it through having these buildings and Sunday morning, we're never gonna get there." That's a paraphrase. Wow. But it was just there's whoa, yeah. Like we've inherited a great machine and a dysfunctional machine. And so for pastors that are wrestling with how to do this, I encourage, and it's so hard because at Resurrection, when I was pastoring there, our Sunday morning experience was really good, and it kept growing and growing, and it was good. It was successful in many ways. The bodies, bucks, and buildings showed up. And but really, if we look at the life of Jesus, it wasn't about, there were crowds, but it wasn't about the synagogue gathering. It was Jesus walking along the road with his disciples and then pointing things out. Hey guys, look, there's some fish. I'm going to make you fishers of men. He taught as he lived his life. So how do you create space for that in your life? It's going to rub against some other values in the church. But so what I have to say is pray about, well, who am I to be discipling? And it may not be the obvious leaders too, maybe the quiet ones. Who's God calling me to pour into and to love for the long term, and just get together and read the scriptures. Just pick a book of the Bible and just read it together, and then just talk. Hey, what are some words that stand out from that chapter? Talk about it. Talk about how God's getting your attention through the word, and just do that on a regular basis. See what happens. I also encourage pastors to let Jesus love them more deeply than ever before. That's been a big thing for me. So I've been pastoring for a long time in ministry, but as I went through this discipling journey, I realized, oh my goodness, I'm a bit of a mess. I'd just been like, we got to grow this church. Let's keep going, push. And Jesus had to get my attention and slow me down. And I had to do more of that inner work as well. And as Jesus was pointing out what was really pushing me and driving me, some of my ambitions, which aren't always godly, or wanting to get the approval of others, looking at the temptations of Christ in there, looking at the elder son and the younger son and the prodigal son, like really wrestling into the deep. And as you are in community with some other people, to share those stories, to share what God's going, because as people hear how Jesus is transforming us on the inside, and even in our marriages and other things, then they get the picture as well. And there's growth, real growth that happens. So yeah, be ready to be vulnerable where Jesus is showing up in your life. Let Jesus love you. It's not just about more information, but it's just going deeper. And I know our families are healthier as a result as well. For me, I learned that I'm a Scandinavian conflict avoider who loves to have the approval of others. That's a dangerous mix in ministry. And as Jesus was doing his work in my life, trying to shape my identity, my baptismal identity, to get my worth, my value from that. Good transformation has been coming. So, if this journey just ends up in just saving pastors more deeply and being loved, it's all worth it.
Totally worth it.
Yeah, I'm kind of giving up on.
You're speaking to a lot of us.
Yeah, I always wanted to go big. Even the bio that I sent you was kind of an older one. I want to see thousands saved. Yeah, of course we do. But Jesus, he's the one who looks after all that. Let's be faithful to what he's calling us to do. Let's be deep disciples who can love people deeply, can be real, and we'll just see what happens. We'll see who else Jesus brings into our lives, and we'll see where it goes, boys. It's an interesting adventure, to say the least.
Yeah, that's great. Dean, thank you so much for being our guest. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to fit us in and come in and talk a little bit for us. If you, our listeners, would like more information about anything that Dean has spoken about, you can check it out on CLBI. To our listeners, thank you so much for listening to the show today. We would ask that you would subscribe or hit the like button so that you get notifications for the next time that a podcast drops. We've been trying to do it more regularly. Tuesdays usually are our drop, and we're going to try to consistently stay on that day. So be on the lookout, and we'd love it if you would share this podcast with a friend or a colleague. Thanks so much for listening, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Oh, Mike, I should add in, we made another website too.
Oh, tell us about that.
We made a website called the72.ca.
The 72.ca.
Yeah, like the word the 72.ca. And that's where people can go and just kind of check out the videos, check out the recordings and what we've been doing, and get more information about getting involved in this. So,
sweet.
So yeah, people can check it out. Anyone can be involved. And who knows, if relationships come and there's some pastors that want to partner with us, yeah, we could do that. It's going to
tremendous.
Taking the long road. It's not a short-term thing, that's for sure. And also, please send your students to CLBI. We'd love to have them someday. They can come and experience this for a couple of years, then we send them back to the church and help them to shape a discipling culture where they're at. So anyway,
nice.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Sweet. Thanks, Dean.
Hanging out with you.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
This has been an episode of the CLB Forge podcast with Pastor Mike Natal and Dr. Ryan Nilsson. Thanks for listening. We welcome your questions and comments. Email us at podcast@clbforge.org.